those decisions that adults do. We expect them to be punctual. We expect them to drive if they are at a certain speed, but that only comes post 21. So any adult who expects an adolescent to take executive decisions, the right decisions, he doesn't know the adolescent brain. Um, Driving fast, drinking over the limit, being non-punctual, saying the right things at the wrong time, or just the other way. It is all a control of the frontal cortex, and therefore sometimes when we want them to be grown up, it's a wrong demand. We teachers need to understand that if we are to work with them, we need to understand that this passage of time has to go through. That there are these passages, and uh, today in this fast-paced world where dog eats dog, the global scenario, changing careers, so many new careers, so much competition, a clash between personal choice and family choice. Which college are you making it to? High cutoff, single parents, divorces, the nuclear family have taken over from the joint family, lack of adult support, the social media, the lure of money and gadgets, the high tech world, their peers, the easy availability of pornography, pressure to perform. It's a very scary world, and our generation has created this scary world for them. And now we want to leave them alone and wish that they find their own way through life. The other thing is that they lack ritual, routine, and rhythm in their lives. And this is one thing that the residential schools, and Manisha will agree, this might provide the ritual, routine, and rhythm that maybe day schools don't provide. There is an erosion of the old middle class values, the religious way of life, the apprenticeship system, where boys learn from their fathers, girls learn from their mothers. And this has been lost. There were these initiation ceremonies of yore where boys and girls had to go through certain rites and rituals, whether it is confirmation from Christians, the bar mitzvah, the circumcisions, killing your first lion if you were a Maasai boy, body piercing, tattoos. The Red Indians had their own rituals. And all these rituals were actually the adult's way of helping a child go through adolescence. And it had to involve pain and blood. And then when they were men or women, they were welcomed back with open hands into the family, into the clan. Today, what's happened is that these rituals have fallen away, and there's no adults around to supervise or to convene these rituals. And therefore, in the absence of these rituals, in the absence of loving elders or mentors, children will find their own rituals: body piercing, tattoos, accidents, gang fights, knife fights, addictions. These are all fake and unsustainable rituals. But all the same, they will find their own rituals and move through adolescence into an unfinished adulthood because there is no adults around. Girls tend to be slightly different because they still have the contact with the mother. Although things are changing now, mothers are working, there's absent mothers just like there are absent fathers. But the mother in the kitchen, the mother ironing clothes, the mother taking her girl for a walk. Girls are generally more in touch with their mothers, and therefore there's a lot of girly talk that goes on, and the girls are being initiated in a way that boys aren't. The fathers are too busy, too absent, maybe missing. And that's the problem with the boy. Now, having said that, girls do go astray from from shoplifting to teen pregnancies to addictions to abortions, leaving home too early, prostitution. Girls have their issues as well, just as boys have their issues. And I would say the loss of adult mentors, absent fathers, and men competing with these boys rather than cooperating and understanding. We become too competitive with them. What we need to do is to listen to them. And we adults are often very afraid of dealing with adolescents. I, as a teacher, have seen a lot of senior teachers not walk into a crowd of boys waiting outside a classroom, but walk around them, avoid them. They are scared of large groups of boys because These large men, hairy sometimes, can be obnoxious, loud, abusive, confrontational. There are lots of them. They hang in large numbers. They're aggressive. They can be smoking. They look fierce. But this is all a front. Trust me, if you scratch the surface, they are good and highly emotional people. They're just misunderstood. They're fearful of us and shy. They hang in with their own crowd because we have let them down. A lot of us have let them down and they don't trust us anymore. I've had parents tell me, as a teacher, how do I handle my son? He doesn't listen to me. He gets up when he wants, he eats what he wants. They have abdicated, the parents have abdicated their role as mentors, and they are now throwing their hands up and leaving it to the school to do what they haven't done. Now, at home, the adolescent behavior is not easily understood, and parents cannot understand how this well behaved 12-year-old is suddenly behaving so strangely. Yet, as I said earlier, they are sensitive and extremely nice people to be with. They All they need is a non-judgmental, understanding elder who can hold their hand and walk along with them. I mean, the story of Michael Phelps is just one story. It is repeated thousands of times all over the world. And the story goes where Michael Phelps was on drugs and he was getting lost like many adolescents do. And there was one teacher who picked him up and said, Michael, if you work with me, I'll make you something. And he worked with him. And we all know what Michael Phelps did. It just takes that one caring adult, that one lady teacher or a man teacher or a mentor or an uncle who puts his faith in these children and leads them away. Somebody they can feel comfortable with to cry, to shout, somebody they can trust. Why? Because we teachers, parents, stepfathers, and the churchmen too have let them down. Adolescents need us to trust them, accept them for what they are, and be able to see what they can become. They need us to believe in them, spend time with them, have programs for them, sports, community service, to work as a team. They love to work as a team. They love to be focused on the outdoors, whether it's rafting, trekking, camping, fishing. We need to take them out of their comfort zone. We teachers need to be surrogate parents, fathers, and spend time with them. And we need to listen to their stories. What we often do is we tell them our stories because we did not have elders to listen to us. And so when an adolescent opens his mouth to tell us his story, we say, hey, we know that. And we start telling them what happened to us in college. We need to focus on their strengths and forget about their faults. And if you look at the brain of the adolescent, what are the four characteristics that teachers find in them? There's an emotional spark in them, and therefore they have their ups and downs, but that's the way they're wired. They love social engagement, the old Boy Scout movement, the Red Cross, community service, rescue work. They love getting their hands dirty and getting involved with people. They're novelty seeking. Kids are novelty seeking. They will go around the corner and have their first smoke. They want to know what lies in that movie. Why was that movie rated adult? There is that novelty seeking about them. We have to understand them. And they are creatively explorative. They will come late. They will go to places which are out of bounds. It's all hardwired into them. They are nonconformists, iconoclastic at times. They're creatively explorative. And I have a small acronym which I use with boys. We don't need to frap with them. And frap goes, we don't need to fix their problems. There are no problems. We don't need to rescue them. They are the rescue. They don't need any rescuing from us. They don't need advice from us. And they don't need our stories. What they do need is for us to listen to them. And what I would leave teachers with, things to remember when you work with adolescents. We need to look after ourselves. It's important to carry on looking after yourselves and not get too stressed out by adolescence. We need to stay calm. And there's this lovely little saying I read the other day: the 90-second pause when your button is pressed makes all the difference between reaction and responding. If we react to them, we have not given ourselves a 90-second pause. If we wait, count 90, or take a deep breath, we will respond to them. We need to talk and listen. We don't need to give them advice. We need to set boundaries. Adolescents love boundaries. We need to let them have time on their own. And we need not give in to their bad behavior. As I said earlier, we need to draw our boundaries. We need to hold our ground. And they need to be contained. They need to be able to vent and spill out what they want without being judged. And I'll end with a small quote. It takes a whole village to raise a child. And the child that has not been embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. I hope I have set the ball rolling for our panelists to take it further, and Achin as well. And thank you so much for listening to me. Over to you, Subhai.
Thank you so much, sir. You did much more than set the ball just rolling. I think that was pretty much over the boundary. Uh, we know that we have overdone it a little bit with cricket analysis, but it has spoken. But I think it was fairly called for. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Achin Bhattacharya. Achin is the founder and CEO at Notebook. A chartered accountant by training, Achin was a director at Deloitte prior to starting Notebook. He has worked in India and abroad in various senior capacities in GE, PwC, KPMG, and Deloitte. He is a fellow of the ICAI and a member of CPA Australia. He is also the recipient of the prestigious Indian Achievers Award. Achin is an avid reader and a passionate traveler with keen interests in economics, history, literature, and philosophy. He is a regular speaker at various forums and chambers of commerce, and also contributes articles to numerous publications regularly. He is also on the board of some of the most renowned corporates and contributes significantly to their brand strategies. Achin, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Shiva, am I audible?
Yeah, Achin, loud and clear.
I once again welcome all of you to today's session on a topic which is not only important and thought-provoking, but also equally challenging for every parent who has an adolescent child.
Achin, if I may interrupt you just for a second, would you mind moving your screen a little bit towards yourself? You're kind of looking over your head.
Is it better now?
Perfect, thank you.
So let's see what's happening around. Louder Than a Bomb is an annual youth poetry slam in Chicago every spring. It is now the largest youth slam in the world with over 70 teams competing in last year. The goal of the slam is to get diverse youth from all around the area to not only share their stories, but listen to the voices of those from other parts of the city, normally those who they would never get to hear, participants from high school, middle school, college. The name of the event, the name of the slam comes from the Public Enemy song of the same name. Another very famous radio show, Stressed Out. Stressed Out is a radio mega hit that leaves parents with a severe case of eye roll. A new nationwide study in US of teens, however, confirms why the song is heading towards 1 billion YouTube views. As any other teens would explain, it's totally on point. Now, the stereotype of youth has never been about savoring those oh so precious moments. Teenagers have always battled to escape the limbo between childhood and adulthood. Time always seemed to drag, and teens sought the freedom to move onward and upward. However, unfortunately, and I'll call this unfortunate, adolescents forever have had a bad reputation. There are so many negative stereotypes. You can go back as far as you want in history. Socrates once said that, referring to teenagers, he once said that they have bad manners, contempt for authority, show disrespect for elders, and love chattering in places of exercise. It is not socially acceptable to mock or demonize any other section of the society. You don't get away with it. On social media, for instance, if you are to mock any particular gender or a certain race, or senior citizens, elderly people with poor memories, but strangely, you'll still see that mocking and demonizing of teenagers. At times, I feel that as a society, we don't like it that our children who used to do what we said, at times are rebelling, becoming independent. For many parents, it's difficult to handle that. And one way of handling the way society reacts is at times to point a finger at them. However, the question is, before pointing a finger or before criticizing or trying to understand or being weighed down by our own burden of expectations and trying to analyze what went wrong, the question is that we also need to hold a mirror in front of ourselves and look at the thing from a more mature and wholesome perspective. At times, there are certain questions, like, for instance, why do teenagers seem so much more impulsive, so much less aware than grown-ups? So I was going to a very nice, very great TED talk, and I'll encourage all of you to go through the same. The Mysterious Workings of the Adolescent Brain by neuroscientist Sarah Jane. But I very briefly touched upon this. Now, she explained that if you compare the prefrontal cortex in adolescents to that of adults, it typically shows how teenage behavior happens because of growing and developing brains, and how in adolescence, how the brain negotiates tasks like planning, self-awareness, and behavioral choices, which are completely different, the way the brain reacts. Few decades back, things were not as clear, but today, MRI scan allows us to look inside the living human brain and track exactly how it functions in terms of structure and activity across the lifespan. Of course, there's still a lot to be discovered. I'm sure that medical science will evolve even 100 years from now or even later, but at least things are much clearer vis-a-vis how it were a few decades back. We now have a much more rich and detailed picture of how the human brain develops. And it shows that the brain continues to develop through childhood and adolescence and even into 20s and 30s in some brain regions, white matter increasing and gray matter decreasing. Now, these changes are thought to be caused by important neurodevelopmental process that enable the brain to be molded and influenced by the environment. So, like for instance, another very important question, all of us, we have in many cases, we have seen adolescents taking more risks. So the question is it so that because of immaturity, they don't understand the challenges, the risks, the exposure? Science says that when you take risks, the brain's positive reward system gets activated. In adolescence, that activation is higher during risk-taking vis-a-vis adults. Now, it is true for non-humans also. So there was a research which was conducted. Adolescents mice took much more risk vis-a-vis adults. Even, the lighter part is that they also drink more alcohol when they are with other adults and mice. Now, there's a changing trend all around us that we see. Given a lifespan time machine, previous generations of teens would have reached for the fast forward button, zipping ahead to college, work, marriage, settling down, but not the post-millennials. Today, so this also brings us to the concept of teleportation. What do they exactly want? So there was a very interesting study I was seeing that many of them were surveyed and they were asked, that, okay, for once, if you assume that you have a superpower, that you can ask for something that you want, what is it that you want? No, they want to control time. Many of our team participants long to teleport. Their coordinates, however, are not set for anywhere that bends the imagination. So it's not that they want to reach Mars or Mount Everest. But a teen dream is a split-second commute. So I repeat, split-second commute between relevant places that they travel to. So be it school, home, extracurricular activities, a swimming class, friend's place, etc. So it's a great way to get more done. So they want to ensure that on a typical day, they're able to get much more out of it. So be it school or say choir practice, swimming, social outing, ensuring that they're able to study for their exams. Also, traveling, spending time with friends. So we understand that, why I'm discussing this particular thing, because if you look at it a little maturely and take a step back, we also understand that the kind of pressure that they're in. Imagine teenagers being given a choice of what you want in life, and instead of asking for fancy objects or fantasizing about something, all they're asking for is more time. So they just want to cut down on time spent for travel so that they could make out much more. They could do much more in a given day. So that also shows the kind of pressure, the kind of stress that they're in. Thus, as adults, I think it's our responsibility to see to it that they really get a strong and large support system. The question is how to build such a system. At times, I always feel that challenges comes from adolescent fantasizing and hero worship. It's very common, birds also refer to that. But the question is, who are the role models? And are they responsible enough? Do they know that any of their action, what kind of impact it has on millions of children, school-going children? News about a role model being involved in something like cricket betting or drugs, how does it affect these children? A fantasy to come out of their drudgery of situation that they're succumbed into. So the need of the hour is a proper mentor who can guide them to identify the two words, real and unreal. Now it's easier said than done. At their age, at that level of maturity, it's a huge task. So how to identify clearly these two words, real and unreal. Also a mentor who can make the students scrutinize human connection and openness and help them come out of loneliness and alienation, if any. Also, can the mentor help, in terms of changing the perception? And most importantly, I think this is really important. The role of a good mentor is to ensure that they're able to teach him or her to love themselves with their errors or flaws, unquestionable acceptance of themselves. So as Birdsar was discussing, continuous comparisons, be it of physical features, be it of social acceptability, so that puts a lot of pressure. So being able to love themselves unconditionally and coming to terms with things as they are. Of course, there's a need for improvement, but that doesn't mean that you continuously keep on questioning yourself and feel bad about it. So the role of a mentor is to really teach them to love themselves. The main confusion which many adolescents, and they revolve around it, is a connection between dreams and aspirations and pain and unfulfilled promises. So how do you really make them understand and realize that at times it's okay to fail? It's completely normal, it's completely human. And there's always a next time. Because sometimes they're shattered dreams and the kind of pressure that the entire society, extended family, and most importantly, how seriously they take themselves. So that leads to unfortunate events. So I was going to some very important research papers published by uh, an eminent psychology professor who studies children's social development at Oxford, Catherine Bangle. She feels that teenagers need friendships with their peers to provide opportunities for learning and practicing social skill, emotional resources, and a foundation for future relationships, including romantic ones. So we all know that teens learn how to provide support and advice to another person. So these are really important learnings, like for instance, how to manage and resolve conflict, how to share confidence and intimacy, and how to be loyal. So very nicely, very aptly she has put this, that they also learn what it means to matter to another person. So I think this is really important, There's the role of friends, because friends can also guard against what is often a teenager's biggest enemy, that is his or her own mind. Because this is a period of vulnerability in terms of sudden developments happening, which at times and expectation at times lead to different mental health difficulties, including depression, etc. So research very clearly demonstrates the importance of social support and engagement with others as a protective factor against depression. So simple things like, for instance, inviting a child's friends and mentors inviting them at home helps, because it offers an opportunity for parents to listen to in an accepting and respectful way to the people that the kid likes and admire. It might cause a little temporary inconvenience in terms of the mess, say for instance, arranging a small party at home or something, a small get together, but it's definitely worth it, because if it allows them to connect with people around their child, teaching children to build positive relationships with other adults. I think, how do you really teach your children to build positive relationships? Most important is, again, considering the fact that parents are role model. So they clearly look up to parents in terms of the relationships that they share with their extended family, with their friends. Thus, again, another very important thing, being a good listener. At times they may talk about things that are very important to them, very dear to them, but things that we feel very, very trivial. But being able to be a good listener, at times asking for their opinion, making them feel important, that okay, they're a part of the decision-making process, and respecting their opinion, howsoever unreasonable it is, but at least giving a patient hearing and having a logical discussion and engaging in conversations, be it at the dining table or at the car, engaging in conversations, listening to them. I think that's a great role that parents can play, a very significant role. In past, we have seen young people making indelible impression on the face of the planet. And we have seen great examples. Be it Joan of Arc, at the age of 13, believing that she was on a mission from God, and with no military experience, leading the French army in a major victory against the English. Be it Bobby Fischer, again at the age of 15, becoming the youngest chess player in history to be named Grandmaster, the highest title possible. Great achievement, undoubtedly. Or be it Louis Braille, he developed the Braille language for the visually impaired. And he did it when he was just 15 years old. And he continuously subsequently tweaked it and expanded it. And he himself was visually impaired since the age of 3. So imagine the contribution, right? It's a huge contribution, undoubtedly. Or be it Barbara Jones. So in 1951, initiating a student strike at the age of 16 over substandard facilities at a segregated school in Virginia. So one of the legendary activists of her time, undoubtedly. And her activism, in fact, attracted the attention of 2 national associations for advancement of colored people. And so these lawyers, they took her case to court. And the case subsequently was one of the 5 reviewed by US Supreme Court during the hearing of Brown versus Board of Education, and was used as evidence that segregated schools are unconstitutional. So imagine her contribution. So court went forward and said that segregated schools are unconstitutional. And the entire thing started from a movement in 1951 that was initiated by her when she was just 16 years old. Or be it Mary Shelley. Although she was not published until 21, she wrote Frankenstein or The Modern Prometheus when she was 18. So Frankenstein being all-time classic. Or be it very recent phenomena, Malala Yousafzai, youngest recipient of Nobel Prize. So we have seen the kind of indelible impression that these people had. Now, in our country, India has the largest adolescent population in the world. Every 5th person in our country is between 10 to 19 years. Thus, undoubtedly, as a country, we stand to benefit socially, politically, and economically if this large number of adolescents are safe, healthy, educated, and equipped with information and life skills to support the country's continued development. I always feel, and when I interact with them, or I always feel that the upcoming generation is rightfully fearless, and I'm sure mentored with love and care from all of us, of one and all. They will really take our nation to newer heights, to greater heights in the years to come. So these are a few things that I wanted to share in this very important topic. We have a stellar panel lined up today, and I really look forward to hear from them on this very important topic. I thank all of you for giving me a patient hearing. Over to you, Shubhai.
Thank you, Achin. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. As Achin mentioned, we have a stellar panel lined up for you. But before that, I'll just take a couple of minutes to tell you about Notebook. We at Notebook are an EdTech organization. We make small, crisp videos that pertain to the school curriculum. Be it maths or English or Hindi or social studies, you would find every topic from the school curriculum made into these short videos that we put up on our website and our apps. Now, these videos serve 2 purposes. One, when the teachers are using them in the classroom, whether the classes are happening online or offline, the teachers can share these videos maybe prior to a class or during a class. What these videos do is they provide a visual cue to the students that raise their curiosity level and engage them better with the topic being taught. And the second one is months later, when the students have to sit for their exams and they need to quickly revise and remember what they were taught on that particular day. They have access to the same videos on their personal devices. From home, they can access the videos on a laptop or a smartphone or a desktop or whatever device that they have access to. And they can go over these quick videos before their exam for revision. This is what we do at Notebook. Today's topic, managing adolescence, finds place in the CBSE curriculum as a Class 8 topic. What I will do now is play you a short snippet of that Class 8 video before we move on to the panel discussion.
It's time.
Time for what?
Time to know what happens when you reach the age of adolescence.
Age of what?
Is your stomach paining and you feel weird?
Yes.
Then keep quiet and listen to me.
What is this? Who are you?
I am a monster.
What?
A monster, and I'm gonna tell you some interesting facts about you.
Okay.
Hello. You paused for some time there.
Yeah, we also have to tell the boys part of the story, right?
So, puberty is the age when you and others of your age start turning into an adult. During this time, your body must experience some changes.
Whoa! And the same happens with the girls as well?
Yes, you will also see changes in yourself, like you will grow a beard and a mustache. Your shoulders will become broader. Your weight will increase. You'll grow hair in your armpits, chests, pubic regions. Your voice will become deeper.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you would find videos like these that tell stories pertaining to the school curriculum and about 10,000 more of those on our website www.notebook.school. With that out of the way, let us now move on to the discussion we have at hand. As mentioned before, we have a stellar panel lined up for you today. I will quickly take a couple of minutes to introduce our speakers today and then start the discussion. We are privileged to have with us Ms. Shampa Chaudhary, who is a psychological counselor. She finished her schooling from St. Joseph's Convent in Patna and specialized in clinical psychology with first class and distinction from Patna University. She is UGC NET qualified and has been a UGC Senior Research Fellow at the Department of Psychology, University of Calcutta. She qualified with Grade A and topped the Family Court Counselor's course from Legal Aid Services West Bengal with a 100% score. She served Legal Aid Services West Bengal as a family court counselor, served the Alcoholism and Drug Addiction Project at Institute of Psychological and Educational Research in Kolkata. She served army schools at Sukna, Siliguri as a counselor, served Gokhale College as a counselor and guest faculty, served Army School Barakpur as a counselor, and led a team of 9 counselors at Ashok Hall Group of Schools. She is a founder member of Dhruv Tara, an online counseling organization, and a founder member of School Counselors Association. She is a panelist with Moods and Minds, a mental well-being unit of Rotary Club of Central Kolkata. She acted in leading roles as a thespian with Podatik, Rongo Kormi, Onamika, and IPTA, various eminent theatre groups in Kolkata. She is presently engaged in private practice, offering services to clinics, schools, and legal bodies. Ma'am, thank you so much for making the time and being here today. It's a privilege to host you. We also have with us Ms. Monisha Datta. Born into a family of scientists, educationists, and defense service professionals, she has always been encouraged to dream of the impossible and then to make it happen. She completed her education from different parts of the country, and living in different parts of the world also encouraged her to take up different forms of art from a young age and became passionate about wildlife, conservation, and different forms of art and music. She started her career as a software developer and corporate trainer after completing her master's in computer science and later her MBA in advertising. Always a favorite with children, she soon realized that the corporate world was taking her away from her core area of passion: children, writing, music, and art. She thus decided to move away from the corporate into a challenging world of boarding schools. She has been the co founder of the Doon Girls School and the Dehradun Boys School. Since her earlier years into teaching, she realized the need of relooking at teaching and making it more about learning both for the educators as well as the students. This got her involved in actively designing child-centric curricula and pedagogies, along with training the teachers. She is also a trained vocalist, a painter, a novice equestrian, and a passionate wildlife enthusiast, nature lover, avid reader, and trekker. She is a person with presence in the education sector for the last 20 plus years, and she's currently involved in understating the global education systems and in devising curricula and pedagogies for early childhood education and senior school based on global requirements. You learn till you die is her philosophy and driving force. She is currently the director of the Doon Girls School and also the director of Learning Forward Academy, which is a part of the Learning Forward India Foundation, and also actively involved in teachers training and development. She is also a regular speaker at seminars and conferences and actively involved in projects to do with mental health in youngsters and young adults. Ma'am, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for making the time. We are also privileged to have with us Ms. Ranjana Shahi. Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Shahi is an academician with more than 25 years of experience in teaching, and she's passionate about working with children. An alumnus of St. Mary's Convent and All Saints College, Nainital, she was awarded Merit of Honor Gold Medal for a master's from Kumaon University, Nainital. After working for 15 years in Delhi, she is now based in Uttarakhand. As she started in 2018, the DPS Haldwani, where she is the founder principal. An educationist possessing a strong commitment to the development of students and staff and the belief of providing a stimulating, safe, motivating, and learning environment. She is very effective in resource, time, and discipline management to achieve academic and co-curricular excellence. Her passion is to shape global citizens who have the roots of value and tradition to hold on to, but the wings to fly with the futuristic innovations to reach out for the infinite. Ma'am, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
I'll stop my share now. We'll switch on our cameras so that we can start the discussion. Once again, to each of you, thank you so much for making the time. It's absolutely a privilege to host you. Before I start with the questions, if I can go around the table once and ask for your opening thoughts about the adolescent years in general. Shampa ma'am, if we may start with you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you very much to Notebook for considering myself to be presenting the panel discussion today as a counselor. And definitely we've got a lot of very good inputs, insightful inputs from our previous speakers, Mr. Philip Purett and Achin, the CEO of Notebook. So thank you very much for that. And if you say regarding insightful, I think it's a very mysterious stage. It's definitely, as the psychologists say, that it is a period of stress and storm. And it may not be so, but definitely they go through their own conflicts, their own motives, their own body image. A lot of has been said about peer pressure, risky behavior, then body image, self-acceptance, self-worth. And so definitely, I agree with the CEO when he said that they need a good mentor. And that is why I think there are a lot of interesting questions that comes to the mind also about role models. Who are going to be the role models? Because I do remember when there was the suicide last year of Sushant Singh Rajput. So one 18-year-old student, she texted me to ask then, is it all right to end one's life? And that got me thinking that what is her mind thinking about. So definitely it's not a very easy period, but then again, it is one of the most creative periods. It's a period of rapid development and learning. So these years, if we could guide them well, and if we are with them, we just have to earn their trust. Trust me, they know a lot. They're very passionate, very committed, very insightful, very focused. But at the same time, maybe what all they need is our unconditional positive regard of them, unconditional acceptance, and maybe gradually bridge the generation gap. The generation gap will be there. We cannot do away with it altogether. But definitely it's a time when we need to respect them, respect their growing identities, their individualities, their personalities, and learn to really get to know them better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Monisha ma'am, if we can come to you next with the same question. Your initial thoughts of adolescence.
So what I would like to make a point on is when we talk about, like, even for the matter today, we are speaking on managing adolescence. Technically it should be managing ourselves to understand adolescence. We don't teach children or adolescents how to manage adults. So the entire concept is that we think as adults we can manage them. whereas they themselves are reaching their adulthood stage where they need to be understood. We've been a part of that journey. So, like Philip sir said, there has been a lot of it that we have lived our own selves. So we just need to be there to ensure that when they are making that journey, they don't feel left out, they don't feel alone, and they are understood. And like Achin also said, that the mentors have to be the ones who understand them. The unconditional word that was being used again and again, even Shampa ma'am said, we have to be available to them unconditionally. They have to be understood. They are anyway going through a lot of changes. Adolescence is actually happening in 3 stages. It's not happening at one go. There is an early adolescence, which we call as pre-teens in today's date and time, which is between 10 and 14 years of age. There's a lot of exposure. Children are seeing things because of their lifestyles. Their bodies are undergoing changes, which are slowly becoming visible to them. So that's one part of it. And they have nobody to ask questions or to make them understand. So as adults, we need to be ready to prepare them for that journey. And when we talk about the middle adolescence, which is actually the real one, the 14 to 17 years of age, that is a time when the child is technically undergoing the physical changes, completing the changes at that stage. The only part which doesn't completely develop is the frontal lobe. So if I may just share the screen for half a second, if that's okay, I'll just show you what a child brain looks like. When we talk of the way the brains function, so if we look at it, this is exactly how the brain functions. The love for parents and the disdain for parents is equal. I hate you comes every second minute. And that's the same role a teacher plays in the life of the child. Rebellion center, risk-taking abilities. We keep passing statements and comments at them that anything to do with music and movies, you remember everything. History lesson, you will not remember, right? Because that's that area of memory for music is huge. And if we look at the lower part of it, to be visible with their parents, they actually are not concerned. Ability to be seen with the parents is somewhere here. Peer pressure resistance is completely not there. Self-image, fitting in gland, every episode of, so this is how their minds actually think. And when their minds are thinking like that, how do we expect them to behave in a different manner? Even a simple thing as memory for chores and chores and homework, this is somewhere here, this yellow little dot. And then the judgment gland, of course, they cannot make judgments. And anyway, when we talk about the frontal lobe to be developing at a later stage, that's where most of our complex decisions, impulse control, and all that development happens, right? And then we talk of the third stage, which is the late adolescence. I think like Mr. Barrett said or Achin said, a lot of us are still developing. So there's a confusion in the way the adults, now the adults want to be the youngsters and we expect the youngsters to behave like adults. So there's a lot of confusion that we ourselves are going under. So I think it's high time we start understanding them and the emotional concerns that they are going through. So that's my take on adolescence. Thank you.
Wonderful, ma'am. In my case, I can personally vouch that the place where it says all the episodes of Simpsons is a very, very large piece of the pie. Ranjana, thank you, ma'am. Ranjana, ma'am, if you can come to you next.
A very, very good evening to everybody. And I think Shampa ma'am and Monisha ma'am have actually taken the technical aspects. I'm not a person who can go into technical aspects, but from my experience with the little ones, I have always seen the age group from age 9 till age 22 and 23. Why I say that? Because I have nieces and nephews who have gone through this stage and I have seen how things have developed and I have actually molded myself accordingly. So I totally agree with Monisha ma'am when she says like we are not managing them. I was adjusting myself to whatever I was seeing in school as well as at home. So I personally feel that we need to understand them, yes. And every like we talk about every child being unique and being an individual on his or her own right. That is where the main catch is, because I need to handle and address every individual's problems separately. Because when I talk about developing a rapport with a kid who may be troubled, or who may just be, in a good phase of life, but still needing to have that kind of, appreciation and a kind of approval from the teacher side. Then there might be somebody whose home, the behavior at home is totally in contrast within school, because we have known kids being very, very talkative, not listening to the instructions in the class and all. And we wonder, are they the same at home? But when you talk to the parents, they say, घर पे तो ये कुछ बोलता ही नहीं है. So you see a very contrasting kind of thing. So what my learning has been over the years, when I've actually had the, I've been very lucky to work with adolescents only, because I started my career as a TGT. So that's the age group, the middle school time. And that's the most fun part of it, because these are the kids who are most impressionable. They are the ones who are going to go all out, and they really make you feel young because they want to try out new stuff. And when you talk to them, when you relate to them, I have seen you learn a lot, and you're able to guide them, because as Philip sir said, you cannot be judgmental. So if they're sharing something with you, you have to listen to all of it without trying to, tell them tips or trying to guide them or trying to tell them, this is okay. Let it be. If they ask for your guidance, if they're asking for it, we go for it. Otherwise, just listen to them, because we have to be good listeners, as already said earlier. So for me, adolescence, it's a very beautiful stage. And you have different pieces of a puzzle which you set up together. That's what I feel. And I've worked with a lot of these kids, and I have felt I've learned a lot. I won't say that I can't say how much of a difference did I make, but I know that I learned a lot, and that has helped me today when I handle student problems, when I listen to them, when I'm able to take decisions which they appreciate. And many a times I get this compliment, ma'am, you are like on the wrong side of a particular number, but how come you are able to relate to our issues? How come you're able to, sort of agree with us? So you're pretty cool with that. And I feel good about it, because, when an adolescent tells you you're pretty cool, that really makes your day. So I sort of feel that it's a learning stage. And yes, I totally feel that that's an age which makes hell of a difference in everybody's life. And as a principal, as a teacher, I've been able to work with them, make a difference, and hope to do so in future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'll take a cue from what you just said about your students finding you pretty cool. And a lot of, because some of the questions that we were getting on the Q&A panel, some questions started with as a parent and a teacher. And a lot of teachers are wearing the two hats, right? As a parent and a teacher. The funny part is the same parents are finding their own children at home, not finding them pretty cool. And when they're in school, their students find them pretty cool. What is this change in behavior with a parent and a teacher? Because it's the same age group, the same generation gap should happen.
No, so this happened, Shubhayu, because I had a very close friend who was one of the coolest teacher I knew. She's a principal now in a school in Delhi, and her own son was there, and she was very, very strict with her son. Like he had he had a girlfriend, so she had issues with that he's not concentrating on his studies and all, or abhi umr kya hai, he's just in class 12 and all. And I was like, you're telling your kid all this, and when the same thing happens in school, you are trying to tell us it's okay, boys and girls, it's part of life, it's a ritual. So I said, how can you be so, you are actually not going the right way? And the son used to say, Mama, in school you're telling your kids it's okay. At home you're trying to question me on my girlfriend and not concentrating in the studies. So this, I think this contrast always stays there with teacher as a parent and as a teacher. So yeah, it is there. It is definitely there. I don't know that it's more to do with being parent. You think you have to be a parent all the time, which I don't agree with. I totally don't agree with it, because as I said, in today's world, I don't want a parent. I think if I look at the adolescent point of view, you stay as a parent only till the time you're handing out pocket money and all. Rest of the time, it is more like you understand us and you relate to us and you are able to talk to us. That is what I have seen in my personal way also, that kids do not understand the parental figure at least in my case, I've seen they want you as parents, but at the same time, they want you to be able to understand the issues. And I think when the friends sort of compliment the child and saying, "Oh, your mom is pretty cool. Yeah, she understands. My mom doesn't understand." So it's sort of, it lifts up their collars. That's what I have seen most of the time. This happens when the kids are saying that, your so and so is pretty cool, but in our case, we are not able to. I'm not saying that's the only thing about being cool, but the fact is, you have to understand them not at a superficial level. You have to understand, have the understanding at an in-depth level. So whatever is happening in their lives, you need to have an idea about it. You cannot be superficial about it. And also at the same time, the problems they are facing, many a times, you have to take a tough call. So you just can't say no to taking it. But at the same time, they need to understand that you are taking that tough call, or you're giving them a kind of a dressing down for a reason, not just because, it's not that all the time I'm going to agree with you. So that kind of boundaries only get set up once you're very have had frank talks with your kids and all. So I have done that, and I'm lucky that at least the kids know it in school as well as at home. This has been the case. So I think I have managed it. I don't know others. Maybe a little more balance is required. But yeah, sometimes you also have to behave like them, and sometimes you have to take a step back and behave like an adult. So it's my personal, I think my personal choice. At the same time, I need to have that kind of judgment as to when I take a step back and when I become one of them. So that's how I would take something like this.
Wonderful, ma'am. Uh, Shobha, ma'am, if I may come to you with the, if is there a science to this? Why do young people find it easier to relate to the teacher and not as easy to relate to the parent when they're the same age group, same demographics, so to say?
Right. So I think, yes, there are many factors about it. It's not just one reason. One thing is that at home, we tend to take each other for granted. And parents also taken by granted by their children, and children also take their parents for granted. So this is what, when I was listening to Ms. Ranjana, I could make out that the same mother who was considered cool by the students was not considered that cool by her son. And it's also because I think teachers have been handling children, borderline adolescents, mid teenagers, and the adult teenagers for years. And for this counseling concept has been now in India, in Indian schools for, say, for the past 17 or 18 years, or maybe a little longer, because when I joined as Army School, my first role in Army School as a counselor, as a school counselor, was in Army School when I was in Siliguri. So almost 17 years now. And it was just being introduced, for various reasons. So a lot of teacher sensitization started happening because teachers had to understand that they are not children anymore and they need to deal with them in a different way. So either that, and teachers have been handling students for a long time, so, and different kinds of students. So it is also when students come to school, despite a lot of rebelliousness, they still, most of them have a lot of respect also for their teachers. And perhaps they come across as non-judgmental. That could be one thing. They are not constantly nagging them. Most teachers do not nowadays. I've seen teachers are very, very sensitive. And when I left my last school, actually, Ashok Hall Group, I remember during my farewell, teachers said that you have left a counselor in all of us. So that was the kind of work that all the teachers have been doing. There's a counselor in every teacher. And perhaps the teacher is more patient. I might not be that patient with my children at home, but I would be patient with, say, 3,000 students. I would not lose my cool there. So that matters a lot. Perhaps the patience of the teachers, the unconditional positive regard of the teachers, the experience of the teachers in handling your teenagers over generations. Maybe there are teachers who are 40 years old, 50 years old, 60 years old. Nowadays, there's no retirement age also. So we have seen very old people also, how well they get along with teenagers. We see grandparents at home and the teenagers get along very well with them because the dad is so cool. if you see, there are bands in Calcutta, and they're very elderly drummers out there. And you'll see the youngsters are doing pretty well with them. So it is all about how you relate to a teenager, the connection that you make with them.
Wonderful, ma'am. Monisha, ma'am, any thoughts about?
So another angle that we can add on to this is children form role models. You know, when you're living with a person, you see the pros and cons of everything. So you see the bad side of a person and the good side of the person. When they are dealing with their own parents, many a times they see the gray shades. You know, the mother losing the cool with the grandparents, or losing the cool with the husband, or the husband misbehaving or saying certain things in a certain tone. So they form an impression about the parents, which might not be completely true. Whereas when they are seeing their teacher, they see their teacher in a role. We also, as teachers, we forget what our personal life is when we move into. So, you know, we shift from that personal area to the professional area. So we are conducting ourselves in a certain way. They do not see any side of us but that compassionate, empathetic side of us, where we are listening to them, where we will take out time, go and sit down with them and speak to them. Whereas back home, if my child would have asked me, Mama, I need to just discuss this with you, I'll say, okay, fine, let me just finish this. Then after that, it will be something else than the third one, right? So that granted attitude and the judgment part that the teenagers also make, assumptions that they make about the adults, that at times plays a role in them relating to people who they think, you know, the cool factor is very important. It's not just in the brains of the teenagers, it's in the brains of the adults also. So we all keep playing a role, and somewhere that line jumping is continuously happening. Parents, I don't think, have that kind of stamina to keep playing cool.
Wonderful,
you.
ma'am. Ma'am, I'll have a follow-up question to what you just now said. A lot of this, the parental judgment, or even the teacher's judgment that happens with students, has to do with what is age appropriate, right? My father has told me stories when he would listen to Kishore Kumar songs, and they would not be considered age appropriate, right? By the time my sister was graduating from school, if she listened to Kishore Kumar songs, my father would offer a praise saying that my daughter has turned out all right. So, what is age appropriate, and does it change? Who decides? Who gets to take that call?
So basically, age appropriate is more to do with our individual mindsets. You know, it's more to do with our beliefs. If we have been brought up in a certain way, the chances of us being experimental with the first kid is super high. When we do not see, you know, and what especially happens as a parent, when the first child comes in, the mother's role specifically becomes, she feels she's under a radar. Everything that the child does is like A plus or A plus plus or A, or maybe B minus and B. So we get graded onto that bracket. So the mothers are very, very conscious of how they conduct themselves with the first child. Same as with the father. So there's always this thing that, oh, we have to do this with the child. These are the things that we are never going to let our child be exposed of. I talk about these new couples who have kids now. When we have these parents joining school, so they'll say, ma'am, we don't have a TV, we don't let them watch TV. By the time the second child comes into school, they have TV, they watched every damn thing that's on the block. So it is just to do with how much energy you have when you're dealing with your child. When you start with something new, there's always a lot of excitement and you give your 100% to it. Over time, you realize that is not much of a damage. There are other things that are damaging it more. So your beliefs also undergo changes because you realize, and then again, if I am hanging out with people who, according to me, are doing well for themselves, the way they are handling their children is better, the possibility of me to learn from them is also there. So my handling will also automatically change. So Kishore Kumar at one stage was not appropriate, but at the other stage, by then. And another factor which I feel, I think looking at the temperament of the children, we give in. When we realize somebody is hearing us, we will try and keep them on track. When we realize this one's a rebel, we'll just try a little bit and leave it at that. At least as teachers, we continuously do. We use different methodologies to handle the way we're going to get the task done from the children. So that's my understanding of how we keep changing with time.
Interesting, ma'am. Ranjana, ma'am, if I may come to you next. Again, this age appropriate thing. whatever we consider age appropriate, if I go back to my teenage years, everything that was being considered age appropriate by my parents, I always felt it was made for a younger me. And I have now become a fully grown up, and obviously this is not for me. So again, how do you bridge that gap?
This we have faced, as you said, you also faced it. We also faced that scenario in our life when the parents told us, no, you're still not of that age that you should be going out or you should be enjoying all this. But when you come to the present generation, and I'm talking for the past 10 years or 15 years, times have changed. And many times the children themselves, they ask a similar question in school, that at home I'm told that this is not age appropriate, you're not supposed to be seeing it. But in school, when we discuss it, it's discussed. Like, many a times there have been topics when a child was inquisitive, wanted to know something, and they were hushed at home by saying, this is not your age to know all this. But sometimes when the same question was asked in school, as a teacher, there are two ways of saying I could have replied in a similar manner. But also sometimes I feel, knowing the child, this particular child is inquisitive, this particular child is not going to sit down without knowing it, so you have to give an answer. Then again, it has to be age appropriate in the way that the answer which you're giving is with how many facts you're giving it. See, the same answer will go across. You cannot lie about things. You have to be honest. But then the answer will go with how many facts is where you as a person has to decide. So you do that. I do that a lot in school, and I have known many good teachers, they do the same thing. So what happens? The child's curiosity is answered, satisfied, without him or her going to means and ways where it could be, they would land up in a very different scenario. So age appropriate, again, it's not a defined factor for me. It is something which I would decide when I would meet the child or interact with the child. Having gone through the same phase ourselves, I think we have as teachers learned it very well, how we have to handle it. Because, I'll just give you a very simple example. A child who is in class 5 who would be moving on to class 6. So 31st March, the results have been given out and the child is promoted to class 6. You've come to class 6. Now it is 7th of April that you are in school and you have an assembly and you were told to line up, and suddenly you sort of, the way you used to go and tag along with the teacher, you did the same thing. And you are told, you're a senior now, please go and stand in line. So my question was, in 6 days, what has happened that from here I have suddenly been elevated to that position ki ab tum bade ho gaye. So that's what I have never been able to understand, and that's what I always question, that how can you just tell a child a birthday comes from 11, he's become 12 years of age, ab tum bade ho gaye ho. I mean, what suddenly happened? He just changed 1 year, like 1 day of his birthday, and suddenly you've made him into an adult or something. So no, age appropriate for me is deciding for the child as and when I look. So I believe more in individual handling than, taking a whole mass and then handling those issues. So I ask my teachers to do the same thing, something which I've done as an individual and something which I encourage teachers to do. And as ma'am said, as a teacher, you have to have the patience to do it. So some teachers will do it, some teachers might not do it. But your task is that every child needs to be catered to. That is more important. So for me, age appropriate is according to the child's demeanor, his or her questions, and knowing about the child. So if I know my child very well, I would know how to answer his queries, which would be age appropriate at that point of time. So it is more individualistic for me personally.
Wonderful, ma'am. Shobha ma'am, I'll again come to you as a resident expert. The science of this.
Right. So, doctors, there's an age appropriate, if you think of the physical development, and there are age appropriate developmental milestones that we see, which you can say as, like say by about 2.5 months, the child starts smiling. By about 6 months, they start sitting up, then they start crawling. So that is the developmental phase. Another is the psychosocial phase. The child starts coming to school. So there is separation anxiety. Some of them are happy to come, some of them bawl. So, they have to be taken back home, or they really make life miserable for others around them, as well as for the teachers have a tough time. So is it not age, is it age appropriate? So I think we set the norms. Every culture, every country also sets its norms for age appropriate behavior that is to do with developmental or psychosocial factors. But say, for example, like according to this American, one association is there about development. So they think that when they did research, they found that about the dating, which starts in adolescence. So in the US, it's considered normal to start dating, say about when they are about 12 years old. But that would say in India would start with about texting, social media, liking somebody, or crushes. They go for these fests and all. But back home, they would be told that, no, this is not your age to be going out alone. I've had students coming to me, I've had parents coming to me that they want to go out. I mean, what is the conflict about? The child wants to go out with his or her friends, maybe to just a cafe, but the parents are not trusting. They do not know with whom they'll be go, what they will be doing. Nowadays, we have a lot of hookah bars and pubs. And that age appropriate for drinking or smoking is about 20. There's no limit on smoking. I mean, there's no bar on smoking as yet, but there is a bar on drinking. But still, you will see adolescents going and getting their drinks. So I've been on these trips and all where the girls did go and get their drinks, despite us being there, and they managed to do it. And there were incidents, we had to intervene in that. So of course, we counseled them. I never told their parents what they have done, because that would create a lot of anxiety for the parents, but I counseled them enough, and that was not repeated. So, we set these cultural norms, and there are these traditional norms. There is this generation norms. Parents will say, we did not do it at this age, so you cannot, how can I allow you to do it at this age? They do not understand that so many years have passed since we were 13 to 19. And what is the value system now? What are the role conflicts now? So this is what I would term about by age appropriate. And like you rightly said, we do not know. I remember when I was in class 9, I started reading Ian Fleming books, James Bond, because we used to watch those movies. And my dad caught me reading. And he said, from where have you picked up this book? I said, it was in the bookshelf, so I picked it up. If you have a book like that and it's in the open, I will read it one day or the other. So he didn't say anything. He just smiled and went away. I think I was one of those lucky teenagers to be allowed to explore. But nowadays, I feel that, teenagers do not get that scope to explore. Not many teenagers. Teenagers are very lonely. With working parents and all, it's become, and many teenagers are either underprotected or they are overprotected. So I remember this famous line from Aadhe Adhure, Mohan Rakesh's script, where I had played the role of a 13-year-old brat who is in that transition stage. And then she's crying. She's been very, very, she's had her moments of rebelliousness, and she's been openly rude to her father, rude to her mother. But at one point, one uncle comes and says, she gets slapped by her mother. And she said, "Is tarah se ro nahi beta, ab bade ho gaye ho." And there is this beautiful line which Miss Ranjana also shared, Ranjana ma'am, that pata nahi हाँ बड़े हो गए हो, पता नहीं किस वक्त बड़े हो जाते हैं और किस वक्त छोटे हो जाते हैं. So this is a conflict we create in them. So definitely we can say that you are a responsible citizen now. I believe in you. You are a thinking individual now. So that is what will reach out to them, that there are students who come and say that I wish to go out with my boyfriend. I want to experiment with sex. That is how open the dialogue is with me. And I would ask that, what is it that you want to experiment with? What is it that it's an experience? So then I have to ask them that, would you be able to do it without any regrets? I mean, would he, of course, it's not necessary that every relation has to culminate into a marriage. But think about your own, conflicts, your own motives, your own feelings, your own emotions, that by chance, he moves on, then how would you feel about it? When I was in Army School Siliguri, the youngsters used to come and ask me, how do we lead our life as adolescents? So when I used to talk to them, they used to come back with their secrets. They used to say that this is what has happened. And I had to clear them of that guilt. because as adolescents, they will want to explore, they will want to get into risky behavior, they will want to do things such which we perhaps never even dreamt about during our times. And it's all right, because I think it's better to make mistakes and learn from mistakes than to have never made a mistake and never learn. So all this age appropriate, we will see that it's in our minds, and even scientifically also, I think adolescents are very, very creative and highly intelligent. I've had many discussions with them in classes, in groups, and as Ranjana ma'am had also said, you get to learn so much from them. And they just rally around you. When there's a problem, I remember there was a truancy in one of the schools where I had worked, and it is those boys again. The girl had not returned home till about 9 o'clock at night, because she came to know, everybody's known that she's gone out with her boyfriend. And the parents were ready to go to the police station. I just stopped them saying, give me 1 minute. I rang up one of the boys and I said, if you know anything about her whereabouts, please tell me, because we need to help her out. Soon enough, they trusted, they told me, and we could help her, help the girl, as well as we could counsel the parents not to give her a thrashing when they found her at the station. So this is it. Somebody would have said, this is not your age to go around and hang around with a boy. But come on, this is her hormones. She wants to go around with that boy. She wants to feel loved. She wants to feel accepted. She wants to feel that she's the prettiest girl, perhaps, in his eyes, whom he wants to date and take out to and buy her gifts, take to the movies or to the restaurant. So I think we need to open up our minds to what is age appropriate and what is age inappropriate.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. I really wish we could continue this longer, but we have a time limit. So I'll come to my last question straight away. Ranjana ma'am, we'll start with you on this one. With technology, access is not a problem anymore. I was very interested when Shompa ma'am said that the younger kids might not have access to Ian Fleming novels, because now it's one Google search away. Whether they do that or not is a very different issue altogether. But do you think technology access has changed the way adolescent behavior works?
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. And also, I think that has made easier for us as adults. You know, earlier when we were talking about nagging and you're talking about cross-questioning and all, so that factor has gone away. Because, you know, you're on social media, somehow you're on WhatsApp and all. So it's okay. Sometimes a child does not want to share a lot of things with you when you're facing the child, when you're, you know, questioning and cross-questioning. Sometimes a message comes across to you, and you know, we do know our kids. We do know our kids. I think I feel we know our kids pretty well, so we know where they're trying to hide something and where they aren't. If I may just give a very short example, my niece, when she was, this is around 15 years back or something, she went for a movie. She was in a PG and she went for a movie and all. And she did not tell anybody. And the father is trying to call her up. Everybody's trying to reach her. She was in Delhi and parents were in Nainital. And later I called her up. So she expected me to start, you know, shouting. So I just said, Beta, you know, these are a little unprecedented times. That was the time when there were a lot of terrorist attacks and all. So I said, you know, you've gone for a cinema and, you know, anything might happen. If something would have happened, there would be no closure for your parents. I had to use that, you know, kind of card. And I said, it would have been nice if you would have told us where you've gone. And I said, it is very appropriate that I will also tell you where I'm going if I'm going anywhere. So it was a mutual thing. And since then we always kept in touch like this, you know, that was not the time when we had phones and all. We didn't have personal mobiles. So I sort of developed that trust with my niece. Today, if I talk about it, till today, we have this habit of WhatsApping each other. It's like, you know, I'm going somewhere. She's in Mumbai now. She's married, well settled, but still she texts me, Bua, we going somewhere here. And I also, like, you know, I have a function in school. Today's webinar, I've just texted her, join in because today I'm in a webinar. So that's the kind of thing technology has allowed us. So I feel it, yeah, it's a plus point. At least, you know, it allows the kids to be connected somehow. Many a times they're not able to speak to us physically, but via this medium, they are able to share a lot with us. So I will always take it positively. I always feel your values have to be that strong with your kids, that they would never try to, lie to, or they would be very nasty or devious about it. I still feel they are kids, we understand them better, and technology we can use to the best of our ability to stay connected without being interfering, without being judgmental, and still tell them that yeah, we are connected and we are there for them. So for me, technology will always be something which keeps me connected to all the kids, be it school kids or be it kids at home. It will always be a plus point for me. I would take it positive.
Wonderful, ma'am. As far as spying and being judgmental is concerned, we can leave that to Google, Apple, and Amazon to do.
No, it will come from them only. Trust me, Shubhayu, kahin na kahin se, they will land up telling us, because somewhere that guilt will be there. So they will land up sharing something with us. So you have to just wait and wait for the time when they will eventually come and say, sorry, I told you this, but something like this happened. So I believe that's better than the child going all out and saying something wrong, which is not acceptable to us. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, ma'am. Monisha, ma'am, the same question. Technology access.
So yes, I do agree to what Ranjana ma'am has to say. See, what happens is technology, at least during the lockdown, and this is from real life example, technology allowed us to watch over what our kids were reading, what they were going through. Because with teenagers, the best thing is every post that is there is actually a conversation with someone. It's not just a post. It's not something they've liked. It is, they're talking. Whether they're talking about some breakup, whether they're talking about friends, whether they're talking about issues happening back home, what's going on in their mind is completely and very easily visible to us. And when we reach out to them, so normally in a face-to-face conversation, when we reach out to them, the chances of us advocating are very high. But when you are liking a post and then attaching some attachment with it, which kind of answers or helps you or motivates you to think otherwise or gives you a different perspective, for them it's a very silent communication. I'm not in their face, I'm not advocating anything, I'm very silently saying I understand what you're going through, but this is another way of looking at it, or just a positive quote left over there for see, it's that moment, that dark moment passes away, next moment they are fine. And if once you kind of develop a trust with your children, and by children, I mean the kids in the school or any kid, basically any child, they all, ma'am beautifully said it, Shampa ma'am, teenagers today are very lonely. They do not have anybody to relate to. So if you build a rapport with them, for them also communication through this technology has become much easier. A lot of these children have created accounts under fictitious names. And under those names, they communicate and they ask questions like, what does one do when somebody is feeling, a friend of mine is feeling like this is happening, what do I do? How do I help her? It's never a friend. It is never anybody but themselves. But they are directly, indirectly, they have the confidence to reach out and they know they'll get the answer. And sometimes those queries are dark. It's that moment which passed. Because you were available to them. They didn't have to call you up. They didn't have to listen to your voice. They didn't even have to show it was you or it was them. And they communicate with you. So at least during the lockdown, yes, technology comes with a lot of its vices, but the boons that it came along with outweighed it completely. At least as teacher, I can vouch for that. So,
wonderful,
thank you.
Thank you so much. Shampa ma'am, you get to have the last word as the resident expert here. In so many years of being a clinical psychologist, you have kind of seen the way technology has impacted. I'm sure you've had parents coming to you and say, my child was watching porn. And you've had cases where, like ma'am said, if a child is going through a dark phase, somebody would have listened and lent a helping hand. How has your experience been with technology?
Yes, mainly rewarding. And because that helped us stay connected, especially during this pandemic, and it's still helping us remain connected. But there were times when it was abused very badly. There were times when there was a lot of these hate messages and maligning somebody over social media. So parents would come to me with those texts or with that, how a child is traumatized because so many people have gone against her, and there have been comments on social media. So although we told them that this is not the right age for them to have joined Facebook and created accounts, so this should have been monitored, but we do realize that we really cannot stop students from doing that if they want to. as Monica ma'am said, they do it under fictitious names and all, just like they ask questions also. The same thing, they create accounts under false names. They have 2 or 3 accounts or more. Definitely there counseling had to be done to the students, to the parents. There had to be awareness. There had to be awareness about cyber safety and giving information, very private information to strangers. And believe me, it's not just adolescents, as Mr. Birat said in the initially, that many adults also commit these mistakes. So there is always a weak moment which we have to be careful about. So we have to just teach them to be, or tell them, guide them to be mentally alert, so that they do not get into that cyberbullying or get duped by hackers. So that is a very important part of technology that we have to teach. Otherwise, and of course, it's very important to be able to meet also, which we are unable to do during these times, because children need to see, they need to feel, they need to touch, and they need to emote, which online it does become difficult. But even then, I think it's better to stay connected than not to have any connection at all. So that way, I think technology had its advantages.
Wonderful, ma'am. Thank you so much to all of you, because this discussion cannot be contained within 1.5 hours. We would have loved to go on and on with this, but due to the paucity of time, we'll have to close it here. But Achin has a lot to thank for. Thank you so much for sharing those valuable insights and your vast experience. Personally, for me, it's been an absolutely rewarding discussion. Achin, over to you for the vote of thanks. As I said, you have a lot to thank for.
A really, truly wonderful session. So I was listening very patiently, undoubtedly very engaging and informative as well. A lot of great things came into the light, including some wonderful examples, real life examples, which always help. Ranjana ma'am, thank you so much for your time. Some really great points you made, ma'am. I really like the way you started off, solving a puzzle. Indeed, that it actually is like a puzzle, and these crucial years, formative years, they have a huge impact with regard to in the future years as well. So I think some great points you made, including the way you explained this entire concept of age appropriate. I really liked it, the kind of examples you gave. And also, I think what you said, that technology definitely being a plus, but our values need to be strong enough. I completely agree with that. That if values are strong enough, undoubtedly any other challenge we can successfully face. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you indeed for your time. Monisha, ma'am, again, I sincerely thank you for bringing some great insights. Really added value to the discussion. So whether be it in terms of role play you started with, and also I think very practically you explained the entire concept of the fact that how over a period of time parents also come to realize the fact that how to practically handle a child. So instance of mothers or fathers, for that matter, parents, in case of their first child being very overprotective or extra cautious, but gradually taking a more balanced approach. That's the way I'll call it. So I think some really great points you made. And also at the end, while explaining about technology, I think a very important point you made, that the way each of their posts actually is a conversation, and we can indeed communicate with them without being overbearing. So I think thank you indeed. Shompa ma'am, some great points you made. So I sincerely thank you. And I think you explained the entire concept of age appropriate from a completely different dimension. It's very true that every culture and society sets their own norms with regard to what is age appropriate. It's not universal. And indeed, I believe in you. What you said, that phrase of I believe in you, a reassuring confirmation of trust. I think that goes a long way in ensuring that kind of bonding, be it in terms of parents or teachers with the child. And that really helps in terms of ensuring that children are far more comfortable in terms of seeking help, coming forward with issues that they want to discuss. Because I think it's really important that to build those bridges of trust. So some really great discussion we had. I also thank members of our esteemed audience for their time today. It has really been a pleasure. In each of these sessions, we have gone from strength to strength. All thanks, the great support that we always had from all of you. I look forward to your support in the days to come. Thank you, take care, and goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.